Mondays just after 5 o'clock, Travis Roeder, SicEm365.com football analyst, will join us. Travis, thanks for your time with Craig, David, Paul Catalina as well. Who other than those who scored touchdowns or some things that are glitz and glamour, who stood out to you the most on Saturday evening?
Ooh, great question. I guess, as you said, other than the guys who scored, I was very pleased with what I saw from the wide receiver room in general. I'll just kind of give a quick shout out to them before I move on to some other guys. But, Monterey Baldwin and Hal Presley, I think it was really, really important, as we talked about last week when we were getting ready for the game, that you started to see kind of a semblance of a rapport building between Chapin and those guys. So I felt like Hal really kind of looked like he was stepping into that Tyquan Thornton role. And Monterey Baldwin, as Dave Aranda said in his press conference today, they very much believe in kind of building scheme around players. And they've said, we've adjusted a lot of what we do on offense to feature him. And I think you saw that with him having a long touchdown on the post and then, a long touchdown in the jet sweep game. And then he received a couple other receptions as well. I guess just a few other kind of random guys just thinking about a couple of fun ones for me. I was one of my favorite recruits Baylor's had in the last few years is the true freshman tight end, Kelsey Johnson out of Red Oak. And, he was playing with the one a lot. We talked about how Baylor has a couple of great returning tight ends in Ben Sims and Drake Dabney. But what we saw this past Saturday is that Kelsey's kind of basically right up with those two. Sometimes he was in there for Sims, sometimes he was in there for Dabney. And he didn't make a lot of flashy plays. As you said, I already kind of talked about the flashy guys, but Kelsey's one of those guys that if you look a lot on those plays, whether it was him pass protecting when they took the deep shots, whether it was him in the, blocking in the run game for whenever they, were able to spring free some big runs, he was a guy that's just, for a guy like me, I love versatile players, and it was really fun watching Kelsey.
Travis, the offense looked like they knew what they were doing together. I know it's Albany, but was there maybe a bit of a sigh of relief that it did look like the skill position guys had been doing it for a little while?
Yes, of course. As I said, you really basically can't have a good passing offense in really any level of any level of football if your wide receivers and your quarterback just don't have a good sense of rapport with one another. And that's, the quarterback has to be able to trust the wide receiver to break when he's supposed to break. He has to be able to throw the ball with anticipation, knowing where guys are going to be. And so, I think that kind of solid trio at the top of those sophomores, I saw Jerry Hill put out an article today that was very well titled and explained by saying, this trio of sophomores, that's Seth Jones, Monterey Baldwin, and Hal Presley. I think they all showed kind of, not a finished product, no doubt. I think especially Hal is a guy that we're going to look back on in probably 8 or 9 weeks and see that he's playing at a total another level by the end of the season. But I think you saw the foundation being laid that tells you they can get to where they want to go by the end of the year. Of course, they needed to be ready for this week as well, but you always see growth throughout the season.
What was maybe not as sharp, or there wasn't like a lot of surprises in that game the other night. That was about what we were supposed to see, I think. But what were some maybe things that stood out that weren't as sharp or as in focus as you expected them to be?
Nothing, honestly, was not as I think it's all about expectations, right, Craig? And I think week one you expect guys to miss some assignments, to just kind of goof up on a couple of plays, because that's just, this was basically the last scrimmage for Baylor of the preseason. And I think that's what's wild. Greg, I know you and I talked about this briefly, I think, but at the game, it's just wild that there was a Notre Dame, Ohio State top 5 matchup going on, because you can see if you watch any of these early games, just, guys, it takes a while in football to really kind of get your feet underneath you. And so, I think there were a couple of instances. I know, like when Baylor had the failed third down conversion, and then they went for it on the next fourth down and then failed on the very next play as well. You look back there and you see basically just on one play, it was the left guard that missed an assignment. And then on the next play, it was the tight end. So, it wasn't like a wholesale. I'd be a lot more worried if it just appeared like the offensive line can't block or something like that. But when you kind of look back and see that it's just one or two guys, missing some assignments that are easily coachable, I think when you look at Dave Aranda in that press conference, he was very clearly pleased with the overall effort that the team played with. And I think overall things are looking good. It's just a matter of cleaning things up like any team has to do after week one.
By the way, on the chat room, AF Blue 82 He said his article, Travis's article, that spotlighted players with cut-ups of certain plays was awesome. And I got to tell you, sometimes those long write-ups about X's and O's I can get zoned out pretty quickly, but having the cut-ups makes it so much easier to understand and follow, and I got to agree with him.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I think it was, you know what? Shout out to my wife. I think she actually taught me how to do that. She had to figure out, she's a professor, and she had to figure out how to screen capture some stuff for school, I think, one time. I think this out went anyway. And she was like, you could use this software to just screen cap the videos and make it a lot easier. And I was like, wow. And ever since then, things have really changed. So I guess it's really it always comes down to the spouse partnership, huh?
By the way, Travis will be joining me tonight on the big one too, our first one of the year, and certainly excited to have Travis in here for that. But Travis, as you look ahead to BYU, this game is completely different. You're talking about just a ton of talent on that BYU side, a ton of experience, and naturally they're always older than everybody else because of the mission trips they do. And this was a pretty good game for most of it last year before Baylor broke it open. What do you expect to see in Provo?
Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about, Paul. I think Albany and BYU are pretty much on the same level. No, I mean,
they call Albany the BYU of New York.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, when you watch them, it's just so clear. Like that whole aspect that you talked about, Paul, with them just always being the oldest team in college football, even if they don't have the most experience, they're literally the oldest team in college football. I think that matters a lot. It's kind of like, how some of these high schools are set up to where the high school system is running basically the same kind of schematic system from like junior high onwards. I think that kind of gives them some benefit by the time these guys become juniors and seniors. It's like, even though they were away on the mission trip, presumably they're somehow still kind of involved with football in some way or the other. And I think by the time they get that old, like they just know what they're doing. They're able to get away with not having as good of athletes as most teams they play. And so, yeah, I mean, I think they're a team that you have to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to make a bunch of mistakes. You just have to line up across from them and out execute them. And that's what's really exciting for me in this game. After a week one where you expect a bunch of mistakes, and I think you saw a handful of those for Baylor this past week, they really got to be on their P's and Q's this week because, like I said, they're going to have to take victory from BYU's hands. BYU's not going to hand it to them.
Travis, enjoy it. Thank you very much. With us on with us on Mondays just after 5, and also the pregame show with the keys to the game. We appreciate that, and also good luck with the big one too with Paul later on today. Anything else? Thank you, buddy. Appreciate your time. Travis Roeder, SicEm365.com, college football analyst, and I'm telling you,